Listen, K-fam. The ring in her hand was worth almost nothing, and it was about to save everything. Rain soaks her to the skin. Grace Holloway, 30 years old, a black woman who restores antique frames in the little workshop her mother left her. Tonight the workshop is about to be seized. So she carries her last resort to a luxury jewelry counter. A narrow gold wedding band, scratched, sentimental, hers. The appraiser reads it in one glance. Low market value, high price paid in every scratch. She doesn't want pity, she wants the cash. Behind a one-way mirror, a man watches. Seo Do-jin. They call him the koi. A black koi tattooed up the right side of his neck, rising past his collar. Head of the Seohan Syndicate. Right now his pen is signing a $2 million transfer for another woman's emerald ring. Then he sees the old band touch the counter. The pen slips from his fingers. Omo. His whole empire freezes in one heartbeat. He knows that ring. He knows that hand. And what he does next, after years of silence, after everything he swore was buried, nobody in that marble room is ready for it. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Grace Holloway pushed through the glass door before her courage could talk her out of it. Rain came in with her, dripping off the hem of the camel coat, pooling on the marble at her boots. She stopped 3 steps inside. She made herself breathe. The pawn shop was warmer than the street. Too warm. The kind of warm that made your eyes sting after the cold. Or maybe that was something else. She blinked it back. Her right hand was a fist inside her coat pocket. Inside the fist, a small box of soft fabric. Inside the box, the only thing she had left worth anything to anyone. She didn't take it out yet. Behind the long counter, a man in a suede apron looked up from a tray of loose stones. Daniel Mercer, 50-something, thin. The kind of thin that came from a lifetime of leaning over a jeweler's loupe. Wire-rim glasses. A brown suit the color of old coffee. He set his tweezers down with a click that seemed louder than it should have been in that quiet. "You can come to the counter," he said. "I don't bite." Grace crossed the floor. Her heels were soaked and they made no sound. The counter was glass over black velvet, and under the glass other people's disasters. Watches with the backs scratched off, a christening cup, a trumpet, 3 wedding sets, side by side, each one somebody's whole life reduced to a price tag and a plastic tag number. Grace looked at the wedding sets a beat too long. Then she stopped looking. "I need to know what you'll give me for something," she said. Her voice came out steadier than her hands. Good. One of them, at least, was holding. Daniel folded his hands on the glass. "Sale or loan? What's the difference? Sale, I own it. Loan, I hold it. You pay interest. You come back for it inside 90 days. He watched her the way a doctor watches you name a symptom. People think they'll come back. Mostly they don't. How much interest? Depends what it is. He gestured, palm up, at the space between them. You gonna show me, or we gonna keep dancing? Grace took her fist out of her pocket. She set it on the glass, knuckles up, and for a second, she just left it there, like she was arm wrestling herself. Then she opened her fingers. The box was navy, worn to gray at the corners. The nap of the fabric rubbed smooth where a thumb had opened it 1,000 times. She thumbed the little brass catch. The lid tipped back on a tired hinge. A ring, gold. Yellow gold, narrow, a plain band. The kind they don't even really make anymore because nobody wants plain. Scratched all the way around, deep enough that the scratches had their own smaller scratches. A ring that had done dishes and turned wrenches, and buried a husband, and never once come off a finger until today. Daniel's eyes went to it. Then, quick, back to her face. Then to the ring again. He didn't reach for it. "May I?" he said. Not a demand. A door held open. Grace nodded. She couldn't do the word. He put on a pair of thin white cotton gloves, one finger at a time, unhurried, and that unhurried thing almost broke her more than rudeness would have. Rudeness she'd braced for, rudeness she could hate. This was worse. This was a man being gentle with the last piece of her mother. He lifted the ring into the light. He turned it a quarter, a half, a full, slow revolution, and every scratch on that band caught and gave back the overhead glow. He wasn't performing. Grace could tell the difference by now. She'd spent the morning being performed at, by a bank teller, by a receptionist, by a man in a nicer suit than this one who'd said the word. Unfortunately, 4 times without once looking up from his screen, Daniel Mercer wasn't doing that. He was actually looking. The ring got the whole of his attention, and for one strange second, she was jealous of a piece of metal for getting a thing she'd stopped expecting from anybody. He said. Just that. A jeweler's syllable. It could have meant anything. What? Nothing. Wear pattern. He tilted it. Somebody wore this every single day for a long time. See how it's thin here. He angled it toward her, pointed with the tip of a gloved finger at the underside of the band. Thinner on the palm side than the back. That's decades. That's a hand that worked. This didn't sit in a jewelry box being precious. This got used. She never took it off, Grace said, before she'd decided to say anything at all. Not for dishes, not for sanding, not in the hospital, not till. She shut it down. She looked at the wedding sets under the glass instead of at his face. Daniel let it lie. He went back to the loop. 2 blocks back, and 20 minutes ago, Grace had stood under an awning across the street and read the sign in the pawn shop window 4 times before she'd crossed. She'd told herself she was checking the hours. She wasn't. She was doing the math one more time. The math she'd been doing every night for 11 days, ever since the letter came on cream-colored paper with a bank's name embossed at the top and the word foreclosure nowhere on it and everywhere in it at the same time. 90 days. That was what the letter gave her. 90 days on the building on Ashland where her mother had spent 31 years bent over other people's broken chairs and split picture frames and split tabletops, sanding, gluing, coaxing dead wood back into something a family would keep. Holloway restoration, hand-painted, the paint peeling now on the second L. Her mother was 6 months gone. The lien was older than the grave. Grace had run the numbers 100 ways since the letter came. She had a decent job and a bad car, and a savings account that held 4 figures if you counted the change jar, and none of it stacked high enough to touch what the building owed. She'd called the bank and gotten a menu. She'd gotten a person, eventually, a tired voice that said the account was already flagged, and there was a process, and the process didn't bend for daughters. She'd asked about a payment plan, and been told the window for that had closed while her mother was dying. Nobody said it that way, but that was the arithmetic underneath the words. Grace had found the paperwork the way you find everything after a funeral. In a box, under other boxes, in a hand you'd know blindfolded. Her mother had borrowed against the shop to keep it open through a bad winter and a worse spring, and had told nobody, least of all her daughter, because her daughter had her own rent and her own tired, and a mother's whole heart set on Grace, never carrying what she'd carried. The interest had done what interest does. It ate, quietly, in the dark, while a good woman sanded chairs. Now the shop was 3 weeks from the auctioneer's block, and the only asset in Grace Holloway's name was on the finger of a jeweler in white gloves, in a shop that smelled like brass polish and other people's endings. "Where did this come from?" Daniel asked. He wasn't accusing, he was reading it. He turned it and read the inside of the band with a loop screwed into his eye. Something was engraved in there. Grace knew what. She didn't need to hear him find it. "My mother's," she said. "It's old. 1978. He lowered the loop. He looked at her over the wire rims. You know what this is worth? Tell me. Daniel set the ring back down on the velvet, careful, squared it up like it mattered where it sat. He peeled a glove off. As gold, as metal, melted, you've got maybe 14 karat, worn thin, so call it 2 grams after the wear. He said the number then, and it was small. It was so small, it was almost an insult, except the man's voice held no insult in it at all, which was how she knew it was true. Grace's jaw tightened. She kept her eyes level. That's it. As metal, Daniel said. Yeah, that's it. He tapped the glass beside the ring, once, gently. But that's not what you brought me, is it? She didn't answer. There's an inscription, he said. Inside, 2 names and a date. He didn't read them out loud, and she'd remember that, later, that he had the manners not to read a dead woman's marriage out loud in a shop. You don't put names inside a band you plan to sell. You put names inside a band you plan to be buried in. I'm not being buried in it, Grace said. I'm not the one who… She stopped. She pressed her lips together until the shake went out of them. Daniel waited. He was good at waiting. 40 years across a counter from people at the worst hour of their year had made him a patient man. How much on a loan? She said. 90 days. What do I walk out with today? He named that number too. It was not enough. It was not 1/100th of enough. It wouldn't cover a month of the interest, let alone the lien, let alone the thing itself. Grace heard the number and felt the floor of her plan give way, the last floor, the one she'd been standing on telling herself it would hold. She'd known, somewhere under the 11 nights of arithmetic, she'd known the ring couldn't save the shop. A plain gold band from 1978 was never going to out-argue a bank. But knowing a thing at 3 a.m. and hearing a man in gloves say it out loud across a glass counter were 2 different animals, and the second one had teeth. That can't be right, she said, and hated how thin it came out. She heard herself keep going. Faster now. The way you argue with a diagnosis. It's 14 karat, it's solid, it's not plated, it's not, there's no dip in it. It's real gold all the way through, my mother told me. My grandfather picked it out. He saved for it. The words piled up and went nowhere. A saved-for ring and a melted-down ring weighed exactly the same on a jeweler's scale. Love didn't register. The scale only spoke grams. Daniel let her finish. He didn't rush her, and he didn't pity her, and both of those were mercies. It's real gold, he agreed when she ran out. Every gram of it real. Your grandfather didn't get cheated. He bought a good, honest band, and it lasted 50 years, which is more than you can say for most things a man buys. He set it down again on the velvet. But gold's gold. The scale doesn't know who saved for it. That's the cruel part of my whole business, if you want the truth. The scale never knows. It's right. Daniel's voice stayed even. I could lie to you. I could tell you it's worth more, take it in the back, give you a fair loan against nothing, and hope you never come back for it. Some shops do that. He shook his head, slow. You brought me the only thing you've got. Least I can do is not lie about it. Grace put both hands flat on the glass. She looked down at the ring sitting there in the light. So plain, so scratched, so small against all the money in the world that it needed and could never be. The building, she said. The word just came. My mother's shop. There's a lien on it. If I don't clear it. She shook her head. This was supposed to be the thing that… She stopped again. She was not going to cry in a pawn shop. She had promised herself in the car. She had promised herself under the awning. She dug her nails into the pad of her own palm until the promise held. Daniel Mercer looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something that wasn't in his job. He pulled the lope out of his pocket and offered it to her, held flat on his palm. Read it, he said. Go on. You're about to sell it. Read the inside of it first. You'll want to have. Grace didn't move. I mean it. 30 years I've been doing this. You'd be amazed how many people hand me a thing and never look at it again, and how many of those come back a year later just to look through the glass at it. Read it now, while it's still in your hand. Her fingers closed around the loop. Cold brass. She lifted the ring, held it to the little lens, tilted it under the light the way he had. The engraving swam, and then it sharpened. 2 names, a date. Her mother's hand hadn't written it. A jeweler had. Some jeweler like Daniel, half a century ago, when a young woman said yes in a rented church on the south side, and a young man spent a month's pay he didn't have. The letters were worn soft, but they were there. They had outlasted both of them. Metal did that. Metal kept the promise after the mouths that made it stopped. Grace lowered the ring. Her eyes were wet now, and she let them be, just for a second, just the once, and then she wiped them with the back of her wrist and set her chin. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I heard you. It's not enough." She slid the loop back across the glass. "But it's what I have. So do the loan. 90 days. I'll come back for it." Daniel didn't pick the ring up. He studied her instead. That jeweler's stare, the one that valued a thing by holding it against the light and turning it until every flaw showed. "You won't be able to come back for it," he said quietly. "Not on those numbers. You know that. 90 days from now, that lien's still going to eat you, and this, a nod at the ring, is going to sit in my case with a tag on it, and you're going to be out the shop and out your mother's ring both. That's the deal you're asking me for." "It's the only deal I've got." "Then don't make it." He leaned back. He crossed his arms. "Sell me the ring, I'll melt it. You never see it again, but at least you walk out with cash and no clock ticking. Or keep the ring, walk out with nothing, and fight the bank some other way. But don't do the middle thing. The middle thing costs you both." Grace stared at him. Rain ran down the window behind him in long, unhurried lines. Somewhere in the back of the shop, a clock she couldn't see ticked, and it was the loudest thing in the room. "Why do you care?" she said. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. "You don't know me." "I don't." Daniel picked up his tweezers, then set them down again. Restless, a man deciding how much of himself to spend on a stranger. "I knew somebody who did the middle thing once. That's all." Kept telling herself she'd come back. He didn't finish it. He didn't have to. Grace looked back down at the ring on the velvet. And here is the thing she would never be able to explain to anyone later. Not to the bank, not to a lawyer, not to the man whose whole life was about to walk out of a mirror at her. In that second, she almost took his advice. She almost swept the ring back into the worn navy box, closed the little brass catch, put it in her pocket where it had ridden all her life, and walked back out into the rain to lose the shop clean and keep the one thing the shop was for. Her hand actually moved toward the box. Then she thought of the sign, Holloway Restoration, the peeling second L, 31 years of a woman's back bent over dead wood. She thought of her mother saying, more than once, in the last hard year, hands full of somebody else's broken chair, "A thing's not gone as long as somebody's still trying to save it. You hear me? Not gone." The shop wasn't gone, not yet. Somebody was still trying to save it. Grace pushed the ring back across the glass toward Daniel Mercer. "Do the loan," she said. 90 days. Whatever the number is, I'll figure out the rest." Daniel looked at the ring. He looked at her. Something in his face gave, some professional wall coming down for a woman who'd just chosen the hard road with her eyes open. "All right," he said, low. "All right. 90 days." He pulled a pad of paper toward him, a stub of pencil, and started to write, slow, in a careful hand, the way a man writes when he wishes the number were bigger. "I'll do you fair on the interest. Fairest I've done in a while. That's the most I can do and stay in business." "Thank you," Grace said, and meant it. She hadn't meant to mean it. She'd come in ready to hate whoever gave her the number. Instead, she stood there in her soaked coat, wanting to shake the hand of a stranger who'd told her the truth twice and profited from her only once, and only barely. Daniel tore the top sheet off the pad. He reached under the counter for the ticket forms, the little envelopes, the pen chained to the register. He set the navy box down beside the ring, open, so it could go into the drawer together, the ring and the box that had held it since 1978. He lined the forms up square on the glass, the way he'd squared the ring, a man for whom neatness was a kind of respect. Carbon copy underneath, yellow on top. He pressed a rubber stamp to an ink pad and rolled it onto the corner of the ticket, and the date came up in smudged blue. The day, the month, the year. 90 days from that stamp, the ring stopped being hers unless she came with the money. He tore the little claim stub along its perforation, slow, so it wouldn't rip crooked. Grace watched his hands do it. She thought about how many rings had crossed that velvet under those hands, how many navy boxes, how many women in wet coats who'd told themselves 90 days, and meant it and lost anyway. She was one more now, a number on a yellow form. She'd spent her whole life not being a number on somebody's form, working 2 jobs so she'd never be, and here she was. But the shop wasn't gone, not gone as long as somebody was still trying. She held on to that the way you hold a rail on a moving train. He lifted the pen. Name, he said, for the ticket. Grace Holloway. He wrote it, Grace, the letters scratched across the little form. And 30 feet away, on the far side of a wall that was not a wall, a long panel of dark glass that from Grace's side showed only the reflection of a tired woman in a camel coat, and from the other side showed everything. The ring caught the overhead light and threw one small bright line across a room she didn't know was there. 2 floors above the pawn counter, behind a door with no handle on the outside, Seo Do-jin was making a woman $2 million poorer without lifting his eyes. The office had no clock. Do-jin had them all removed the year he stopped needing to be told when it was late. Instead, there was the desk, a single slab of black walnut wide as a coffin lid, and on it, dead center, a velvet tray. On the tray, the ring. Charlotte Whitmore sat across from him with her spine an inch off the chair back, the way she'd been trained to sit before she was old enough to know she was being trained. Powder blue crepe, copper waves polished flat. She had not touched the coffee that had gone cold at her elbow. She was watching Do-jin's hands, and Do-jin's hands were reading a contract he had already memorized. "Daniel's downstairs," she said. "He can be up in 3 minutes." 2. "Then let's do 2. A small laugh, brittle at the edges. "I don't like these buildings, Do-jin. They smell like old money that changed hands too many times." He turned a page. He let her wait for the sound of it settling. The ring on the tray was the reason she'd come. Emerald cut, a big white stone flanked by 2 smaller ones, all of it caged in platinum. The kind of thing that gets photographed on a hand raised in front of a face. The kind of thing that means a father is pleased. $2 million of pleased. Charlotte had worn it to 4 galas and 1 funeral and had decided, somewhere between the 3rd gala and the funeral, that she would rather have the money and the man than the stone and the promise. That was the arrangement. She sold him the ring at appraisal. He signed the transfer. And the marriage, the alliance, both families kept calling it that, alliance, like it was a treaty and not 2 people, moved from discussed to done. Do-jin knew all of this. He had built all of this. And he was signing it with the patience of a man buttoning a coat. "You could look happier," Charlotte said. "I could." A knock. 2. Then 1. The pattern the front desk used. Do-jin lifted 1 finger off the walnut and the door opened. Arthur Beaumont came in first, because Arthur went first into every room he was paid to be in. Silver side part, midnight navy suit buttoned at the vest, The burgundy tie knotted so tight it looked load-bearing. He was the manager of the house, which meant he was the man who made money look like manners. He crossed the carpet, folded his hands, and inclined his head at exactly the angle a 55-year-old spine can hold without effort. "Mr. CO, Miss Whitmore, everything is prepared." Behind him came Daniel Mercer. The same Daniel from the counter downstairs, suede apron traded for a jacket now, charcoal brown, thin wine tie, the cotton gloves peeled off and folded into a breast pocket like a second handkerchief. He carried a small case the size of a hardcover book. His shoulders had that forward lean of a man who spends his life bent over other people's valuables. He set the case on the corner of the desk Arthur indicated, and he did not sit, because no one had told him he could. Dojin's building was a strange animal. Downstairs, a pawn counter that took a widow's ring for a loan that wouldn't cover a month of interest. Upstairs, this. The same appraiser worked both. Most days, Daniel didn't think about the seam between the two. Today, he'd think about nothing else, though he didn't know that yet. "The stone," Dojin said. Daniel opened the case. Lupe, tweezers, a folded cloth, a small scale. He lifted the ring off the velvet tray with the tweezers and brought it into the pool of light thrown by the single lamp Dojin allowed. He worked the way he always worked, slow, murmuring numbers to himself. The loop screwed into his eye socket until his face went lopsided with concentration. "Emerald cut, center stone reads at just over 4 carats," he said. "Half to the room, half to the ring. G color, VS1. The 2 side stones are matched. Good matching, 1/2 carat each near enough. Platinum stamped, the settings van." He stopped himself. "Named no houses in this room. The setting is what you'd expect at this level. The number," Arthur said gently. Daniel set the ring down on the cloth. "At auction, honest, you'd see 1.1, maybe 1.2. Retail replacement, the paper says 2. He glanced at no one. "You're paying 2. I'm paying 2, Dojin agreed. Charlotte exhaled through her nose. "See, that's the part I love. Everyone in this room knows it's worth half what you're handing me, and you hand me the whole number anyway. I'm not buying the stone." Dojin uncapped his pen. Black resin, silver trim, a fountain nib he refilled by hand, because he liked the ritual and distrusted anything he couldn't take apart. "I'm buying a signature." Charming. She said it like an insult and meant it like a truce. Arthur produced the transfer documents from a leather folio and laid them in a fan across the walnut. 3 copies, tabs where the initials went, a final page where the name went. He was very good at this, Arthur. He made the moment feel like a thing that happened to careful people, not a thing that emptied a girl's future into a man's vault. Dojin signed the first tab. The nib whispered. He signed the second. He turned the copy toward Charlotte, and she signed with a pen from her own bag, a gold one, because even here she would not use his ink. 2 down, 1 page left, the one with his full name at the bottom, the one that made the 2 million move. Dojin flexed his hand once. The onyx signet on his right ring finger caught the lamp. On the left side of his neck, no, the right. The koi always came up the right. The tattoo sat quiet above his open collar. Ink turning to skin, turning to steel gray shirt. 1 black fish frozen mid-climb through water that wasn't there. He didn't think about it. He never thought about it. It had been there long enough to be weather. He drew the last page toward him. And because the light in that office was engineered to make men feel watched and to let one man watch, there was a window in the wall to Dojin's left. Not a window to the street, a window to below. A long panel of dark glass, angled and treated, that showed the appraisal floor 2 stories down, and the pawn counter beyond it, the whole cathedral of the business, laid out like an architect's model. From the far side, it was a mirror. A tired woman in a camel coat would see only herself. From here, it was theater, and Dojin had the only ticket. He had not looked at it once in an hour. He had no reason to. Deals didn't happen down there. Down there was noise and rain, and the small, desperate arithmetic of people who came to the wrong door. He looked now, not on purpose, just the animal habit of a man who has survived by clocking every room he's in, a 2-second sweep left, the pen already lowering toward the page, and his hand stopped. Down on the counter, under the same overhead light that lit the wedding sets in their case, a woman had set down a ring. It was nothing. That was the thing. It was the smallest object in the whole tableau. A narrow band of yellow gold, flat, scratched to a dull shine, the kind of ring that stops meaning money the day it's bought and starts meaning something you can't sell. Daniel, the other Daniel, the counter Daniel, the same Daniel who was standing 3 feet from Dojin right now with his lupe still warm from a $2 million stone. No. Dojin's mind stumbled on the doubling and threw it out. Different moment. Earlier. The panel didn't show now, it showed the floor, and the floor showed her. Grace. Dojin's eyes did not widen. His face did the thing his face had spent 10 years learning to do, which was nothing. But under the desk his heel came off the floor. And the fountain pen, tilting the last 1/4 inch toward the signature line, met the walnut at the wrong angle, rolled off the side of 2 fingers that had forgotten they were holding it, and dropped. It hit the desk, bounced once, left a comma of black ink across the bottom margin of the page that was supposed to make $2 million move, and came to rest against the velvet tray with a small sound that in any other room would have meant nothing. Arthur's eyes went to the pen, then to Dojin's face, then, professionally, away. Mr. Seo? Dojin did not answer. He was looking at the panel. He was looking at the woman on the far side of 2 floors and 1 lie, and he was not seeing the office, or Charlotte, or the ruined page, or the $2 million that had just stopped being the most important number in his life. He was seeing a hand he knew. He would have known it anywhere. He had held it in a room the size of a closet 10 years, and a whole other life ago, when he had nothing, and she had less, and they had thought, both of them, stupid and young, that nothing plus less could add up to enough. He knew the way her thumb pressed flat against her forefinger when she was afraid. He knew the knuckles. He had memorized the knuckles the way other men memorized escape routes, and for the same reason, because someday he might have to find his way back in the dark. And on the wood in front of that hand, her mother's ring. He knew that ring too. Not the stone. There was no stone. He knew the band. He knew the scratches. He knew that a woman named Ruth Holloway had worn it through 31 years of stripping varnish off other people's furniture and had never once taken it off, not to wash, not to work, not to dye, and that her daughter had sworn, he'd heard her swear it, in the dark, in the closet-sized room, that the ring would go in the ground with the both of them before it ever went anywhere else. The ring was on a pawn counter, which meant the ground had opened somewhere, which meant Ruth was gone, which meant Grace had reached the bottom of a well he did not know she'd been falling down, and had reached it alone, and had walked in the rain to the one kind of door people walk to when there are no other doors, and had put the last unsellable thing she owned on a piece of black velvet because the alternative was worse. He had done that. Not the falling, but the alone. Dojin. Charlotte's voice sharpened. You've got ink on the contract. He heard her from a great distance, the way you hear someone talking in the next apartment. There's a mark on the page. Arthur, smoother, already lifting a fresh copy from the folio. It's nothing, sir. We have duplicates. I'll relay it. Leave it. 2 words. Flat. Arthur's hand stopped over the folio. Daniel, who had spent 40 years reading rooms because reading rooms was how you kept your fingers when you handled other men's fortunes, felt the temperature of this one change and could not have said how. He looked at the appraiser's window without knowing why he looked, saw the floor below, saw a woman in a camel coat, and felt a small itch of recognition he couldn't place. She'd been at the counter, hadn't she? Earlier, some ordinary loan, and then Dojin moved and the itch was gone. Dojin stood. He did it slowly, 94 inches of him unfolding from the chair, shoulders coming square, the graphite blue jacket falling straight. He set both hands flat on the walnut, and he leaned, just slightly, toward the glass, the way a man leans toward a fire he's not sure is real. "That woman," he said. Not a question. He didn't take his eyes off her. Downstairs, the counter. Arthur followed his gaze to the panel. "There's a loan being written, I believe. Daniel handled it before we came up. A beat. A gold band. Nothing of value, sir. Sentimental piece. Sentimental piece," Dojin repeated. 14 carat, hardly 2 grams after wear. Daniel spoke before he thought to stop himself, the appraiser in him answering a question about metal, because metal was the one language in that room he trusted. "I gave her 90 days. Won't cover the interest. I told her as much. She took it anyway. He hesitated. "There's an inscription inside. 2 names. I didn't read it out. Didn't feel it was mine to read." Dojin turned his head. The first time in an hour he had aimed his full face at another human being, and Daniel felt the aim like a weight. "What names?" "I didn't read them, Mr. CO. Out of respect, "What names?" Not louder, lower. The koi on his neck did nothing, and somehow, that was worse than if it had moved. Daniel's mouth opened. He looked, helplessly, at the small case on the desk, at Arthur, at the woman in the glass. "I don't know them," he said, and it was true, and it was the wrong true, because the not knowing was suddenly the most dangerous thing in the room. A woman's name, and a man's, and a year, 1978. Her mother's, she said. Her mother wore it 31 years, 1978. Dojin's mind closed around the number and held it. He knew that year. He'd been shown that year once, in the dark, in the closet-sized room, a girl tilting a band toward what little light there was, and reading 2 names off the inside of it in a whisper, like a secret she'd decided to trust him with. He'd asked her, then, whose names. She'd told him. He remembered her mouth making the shapes. He remembered thinking that a ring could carry a marriage the way a spine carries a body. Invisible, load-bearing, the thing everything else hangs on. He had spent 10 years teaching himself to forget the shape of her mouth. 2 grams of gold on a pawn counter had just undone the whole education in under a minute. Something went across Dojin's face then that none of them had a name for. It was there and gone, fast as the pen had fallen. Charlotte saw it and felt, for the first time in the 6 months of this arrangement, genuinely afraid. Not of him, she'd made her peace with being afraid of him, that was priced in, afraid of what she was looking at, which was a locked man watching a door open that he had welded shut himself. "Dojin," she stood too, one hand on the desk. "We have a page to sign. My father's people expect a call by 6. You wanted this. You built this. 2 families, 1. Sit down, Charlotte." He said it without heat. He said it the way you'd tell someone the time. And that was what made her sit. He came around the desk, past the ruined contract, past the velvet tray and the $2 million ring that no one in the room was thinking about anymore, including the man who'd been about to buy it. He stopped at the glass and put 4 fingers against it, lightly, over the small, far-off shape of a woman signing her name to a pawn ticket. Downstairs, he could see it. The panel showed all of it, silent. Grace pushed a slip of paper back across the counter, straightened, pulled the wet camel coat tighter at the throat. Under the overhead light, the gold band caught the bulb and threw one thin, bright line up and out, up 2 floors of engineered glass, and it landed, he would swear this to himself later, on the nights he couldn't sleep even more than usual. It landed on the back of his hand, one small line of light, like the ring reaching up through 2 floors of his own architecture, to touch the man who'd left it behind. Dojin's jaw set. Arthur, sir, the loan on that ring, it's 90 days? Arthur glanced at Daniel, who nodded once. Yes, sir, 90. Who has the stub? Her or us? She keeps the stub. We hold the piece. It goes in the ledger and the drawer. Arthur's careful voice was working hard to stay careful. Standard, sir. It's a routine loan on a low value. Don't. Dojin didn't turn from the glass. Don't call it low value in this room again. The office went quiet enough to hear the pen still rocking, faintly, against the velvet where it had fallen. Charlotte tried once more, because Charlotte had been raised never to leave a silence unowned. Whoever she is, she said, carefully, watching his back. She's a stranger with a cheap ring and a sad story. This city runs on sad stories. You taught me that. A pause. You're not going to blow up $2 million and a marriage over a woman you can't even hear through the glass. Dojin took his hand off the panel. He turned around, and when he faced them, the nothing was back on his face. The perfect nothing. The vault door closed, the mask he wore to boardrooms and to funerals and to the mirror. But his eyes had gone somewhere the mask couldn't cover, somewhere 10 years deep, and Charlotte, looking into them, understood that the alliance her father had spent 18 months building had just died in a room with no clock, and that she had watched it die, and that she would spend a long time deciding whether she was relieved. Daniel, Dojin said. The appraiser straightened. Mr. CO. The ring stays out of the drawer. Dojin picked up his own ruined contract off the walnut, folded it once, and held it in his fist, without seeming to know he'd done it. It doesn't go in the ledger. It doesn't go in the vault. It doesn't go anywhere. His voice was very level and very quiet, and the whole room leaned into it against its will. Nobody touches that ring but me. Arthur opened his mouth, closed it. Sir, Arthur said, and his careful voice had a crack running through it now. Hairline, but real, with respect. A piece held against a loan has a process. It gets logged. It gets numbered. If it goes missing from the ledger, the audit, then I'll be the audit. Dojin's eyes came up off the glass and landed on his manager, and Arthur felt the full 94 inches of the man arrive behind them. You've kept my books 11 years, Arthur. Keep this one line the way I tell you, and never ask me why. Arthur held the look for 1 second longer than most men could. Then the silver head bowed, the professional bow, the bow that turned surrender into service. As you say, Mr. CO. Charlotte looked at the $2 million stone on the velvet tray, alone now, unwanted, catching the lamp with nobody left in the room to care. And 2 floors down, not knowing any of it, not knowing the glass, not knowing the man, not knowing that the pen he'd dropped had left a black comma across a fortune, Grace Holloway pulled her coat tight, picked up her stub, and turned toward the door and the rain, while above her, behind a wall that was not a wall, CO Dojin stood holding a crushed contract in one fist and watched her go, and did not move, and did not breathe, and did not for the length of 10 years, blink. The crushed contract hit the walnut desk and did not sit still. It rolled a quarter turn, the $2 million signature line facing up, that black comma of ink staring at the ceiling like a wound that refused to close. Dojin was already past it. He crossed the office in 4 strides and hit the door with the flat of his hand before Arthur could reach the handle for him. Charlotte stood up, her chair scraped. Dojin, sit down. I sat down twice already. The powder blue crepe of her dress caught the lamp as she moved into his path. She was fast for a woman in silver heels. My father is calling in 40 minutes. You do not want him hearing there was a problem. He looked at her the way a man looks at furniture he is about to move. There's no problem, Charlotte. There's no arrangement. Those are 2 different sentences, and you only get to keep one. Arthur set the 3 copies down on the desk very quietly. The way you set something down near a sleeping animal. Charlotte's mouth opened, then closed. She recalculated. She had spent 18 months learning this man's silences, and she reached for the one lever she still trusted. The emeralds on the tray, your signatures on 2 pages. Legally, that's a stain, Dojin said. He did not raise his voice. That was the terrifying part. Daniel, the ring goes back in her purse. She keeps it. I keep nothing. 2 floors of glass and steel, and he had made the whole thing evaporate in the time it takes to breathe out. Charlotte's chin came up. Copper waves, polished, not one strand loose. You're throwing away $2 million because a woman walked into your pawn shop. Dojin turned the door handle. Cold air from the stairwell moved into the room. He looked back at her once, and when he spoke, it landed flat and final, in front of Arthur, in front of Daniel, in front of the appraiser's lamp and the untouched tray. I'm giving you back $2 million because I don't need to buy a wife anymore. Go home, Charlotte. Tell your father the koi doesn't sign in ink that runs. Somewhere in the room, a small mechanical sound. Daniel setting his lupe on the felt, hands suddenly needing something to do. Charlotte did not cry. Women built like her do not cry in rooms with witnesses. They file it, they carry it out, they spend it later. She gathered the pearl gray cashmere off the back of the chair, draped it across her shoulders in one clean motion, and picked up the exotic skin clutch. She left the emerald on the velvet tray. She left it on purpose, a $2 million full stop, and she walked to the door he was holding open like he owed her the courtesy. At the threshold she stopped. She doesn't know who you are, Charlotte said, low, only for him. Does she? His jaw moved. Nothing came out. 10 minutes ago, you were about to marry me for a merger. Charlotte's green-gray eyes went over his face once, reading the damage, finding all of it. Now you're going to run down 2 flights of stairs for a woman holding a ticket. Whoever she is, a thin breath, almost a laugh, not quite. God help her. She went. Her heels struck the stairwell in a fast, even rhythm. Down, down, gone. Dojin let the door swing. He was already looking at the wall that was not a wall. Down at the counter, through the mirrored glass, Grace Holloway was pulling her camel coat tight across her chest. She had the stub in her hand. She turned toward the front door, and the gray wall of rain behind it, and every second she moved was a second closer to the street, to the buses, to disappearing into a city of 9 million, the way she'd disappeared out of his life once before. Daniel, Dojin's voice cracked across the office. Downstairs. Now, the ring stays. Move. Daniel Mercer was 50-something and had spent 40 years being unhurried on principle. He moved anyway. He'd stripped off the white cotton gloves and was reaching for the charcoal brown jacket when Dojin took the stairs. He did not take the private elevator. The elevator was smooth and slow and civilized, and he had none of those things in him right now. He took the service stairs 2, 3 at a time, one hand skimming the rail, the koi at his neck rising with the pull of his shoulders, and he hit the appraisal floor with the momentum of a man who had spent 10 years walking slowly on purpose and had just remembered how to run. The counter, the velvet, the gap in the case where 3 wedding sets sat under glass and 1 small navy box did not. Grace was 6 feet from the door. Wait! It came out of him before strategy could catch it. The word bounced off marble. 2 customers near the watch case looked up. Grace looked up. She looked at him. 10 years. He'd built an empire out of not being looked at like this, and here it was, the exact tilt of her head, the exact stillness that came over her when she was deciding whether a man was worth the energy of a full sentence. Her eyes moved over him, the suit, the height, the tattoo climbing out of his collar, the platinum watch, and he watched her not recognize him. He watched the machinery of it. Stranger, rich, fast, trouble. Her hand tightened on the stub, and she took a step back toward the door. "Ma'am?" Daniel arrived behind Dojin, slightly out of breath, sliding into the space with professional smoothness because a stranger charging a customer needed a familiar face fast. "Ms. Holloway, it's all right." Grace's shoulders came down half an inch at the sight of him. Half an inch. She still had one boot pointed at the exit. Dojin made himself stop. He put 6 feet of marble between them and did not cross it. "You came in with a ring," he said. Quieter now. "Gold. Thin band. From 1978. Grace went very still. "How do you know the year?" Behind the counter, another appraiser, younger, glasses, no idea what room he'd walked into, had the lone drawer half open, the navy box sitting on the felt, ticket paper clipped. Dojin's eyes cut to it and back. "That ring's not for sale," Dojin said. "Not the loan, not the metal. Cancel it." "It's already logged," the young appraiser started. "Unlog it." Dojin didn't look at him. He was looking at Grace, and his voice dropped into something that wasn't a boss voice anymore, something with the floor gone out from under it. "Please?" Grace's jaw set. Chocolate deep skin, gold light from the overheads catching the rain still frozen in her curls at the temples, and a look on her face that had walked into a bank and been told no, walked into a lawyer's office and been told no, walked into this city for 6 months carrying a dead woman's whole life in a fist. She had run out of patience for men who used the word "please" like a lever. "I need the money," she said, flat. "That's why it's logged. That's the whole story. There is no story where you sell that ring." Dojin took one step, just one. "Whatever the shop needs, whatever the lien is, it's handled. Today, the ring stays on the felt, and you walk out with what you came for, and you don't hand your mother over a counter." The word mother. Did it? Grace's face changed. Not softening, sharpening, a blade coming out. "Don't," she said. "Talk about my mother. You don't know my mother." Ruth. His mouth barely moved. 31 years at Holloway Restoration. Never took it off. Not at the bench, not at the hospital. The stub crumpled in Grace's hand. The 2 customers by the watches had gone quiet. Daniel had gone quiet. The rain filled the whole shop. "Who are you?" Grace said. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a demand with a floor missing under it too. Dojin didn't answer that. He couldn't answer that here, on a floor, with the lone drawer open and an appraiser's hands hovering over the navy box, with 10 years of built distance collapsing at a speed that scared even him. He turned instead, sharp whole body, the koi flashing at his throat, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You," he pointed at the young appraiser, "the box. Close the drawer. Nobody touches it." Then he looked up, and the whole floor felt it. "Clear the room. 10 minutes. Close the front." "Sir, we have customers, a manager somewhere, a woman with a lanyard, brave. Comp them. Anything they were looking at, they leave with it, no charge, my account, now." Movement. Fast movement. The kind of movement money makes when it's angry. Staff peeled the 2 watch customers toward the door, with the frantic grace of people who understood exactly whose building this was, even if the woman in the wet coat did not. And then there was Daniel. Dojin walked to him, reached inside the graphite blue jacket, came out with a fold of bills, thick, banded, the kind a man like him carries the way other men carry keys. He did not count it. Counting was for people who could run out. "You appraised her ring," Dojin said. "I did." Daniel's voice was even. 40 years of even. "You did it honest. 14 carat, 2 grams, metal value nothing, and you didn't read the names out loud." Something flickered across Dojin's face, the closest thing to respect he'd shown all day. "You looked at a grieving woman, and you gave her the truth gentle. I saw it. Through the glass. I saw all of it." Daniel's eyes went, just once, to the mirrored panel high on the wall, and then back. Something landed for him. Not the whole shape of it. Enough. Dojin pressed the banded fold flat against Daniel's chest, against the charcoal brown jacket, and held it there until the man's hand came up to take it. That's for the appraisal, and for your silence walking out that door. His hand stayed a beat longer, a grip more than a gift. You did your job right in a place that doesn't reward it. Take the money, go home. You were never in this room. Daniel Mercer looked at the fold in his hand. More money than the shop paid him in a season. More than the ring. More than the loan. More than the medal. And he looked at Grace, standing frozen by the door with the stub crushed in her fist, and something in the old appraiser's posture asked a question about whether he should leave her alone with this. She's safe, Dojin said, reading it. Low. On my life. Safer in this room than anywhere in this city. Go. Daniel went. At the door he paused, the way a decent man pauses, and he caught Grace's eye and gave her a small nod. I appraised your mother honest, and I'm sorry, and whatever this is, it's above me. And then the rain took him, and the door sealed, and it was the two of them, and the closed shop, and one navy box in a drawer nobody was allowed to touch. Grace's chest was moving fast. She'd watched a man in a $2,000 suit empty a storefront, comp strangers, and pay off a jeweler with cash out of his coat, and she still had one boot aimed at the exit and both hands full of a pawn stub. Unlock that drawer, she said, or open that door, one of the two, because I don't know what this is, and I've had 6 months of men deciding things about my life in rooms I got walked into. Dojin heard it. He heard the 6 months in it. He heard the bank and the lawyer and the lien letter and the auction clock. He'd built a machine that ate people who bent, and he'd spent a decade making sure this exact woman never had to bend, and he'd done it so well that she'd bent anyway, alone, over a counter, with the one thing he'd have burned the city to protect. The drawer stays closed because that ring is not collateral, he said. It was never collateral. You don't get to hand it to a stranger for 90 days of interest that won't even cover a month, and you don't get to lose the shop. And the ring, which is exactly the road you're on. Somebody already told you that today. The old man. He was right. Grace's eyes narrowed. You heard that too. I hear everything that happens on this floor. He said it plain. No threat in it. Just fact. And it was worse than a threat, because it was true. She took that in. The mirrored glass. The year. Her mother's name. Ruth. The bench. The hospital. Things she had told no one in this city. Things she had barely told the counter. Her free hand rose slowly to her own collarbone, the way a person's hand goes to their throat when the floor tilts. You've been watching me, she said. For 11 minutes. His voice broke on it, the first crack all day he didn't smother. I've been watching you for 11 minutes, and it undid 10 years of work. What does that mean? And this was the moment. He could feel it, the edge of the thing, the name and the year and the closet-sized room and the two names inside a gold band that she had read out loud to him once when he was a boy with nothing. It was right there. He wanted to say it so badly his hands had closed into fists at his sides, the onyx signet biting his own knuckle. He didn't say it. Not yet. Not on a shop floor with the lights too bright, and her boot still pointed at the door, and her whole body braced to bolt. If he said it now, she would run, and she would be right to, and he would lose her a second time in the same building. So he gave her the only true sentence he could afford. It means you can sell anything in this city, Dojin said. The shop, the tools, the bench, your car, the coat off your back. You can sell all of it, and I'll help you get a fair price for every piece. But you don't sell that ring. You can sell anything except our story. The word hit her like a hand. Our. Grace's lips parted. The stub slipped from her fingers and dropped to the marble, small and white, forgotten. Her eyes did the thing his had done through the glass, the machinery, the searching, the man in front of her disassembled and rebuilt against a memory she had folded up and buried under 6 months of grief and 10 years of moving on. The suit fell away, the height, the watch, the tattoo, the cold amber shop light. Underneath it, for 1/2 second, she almost saw the boy. "What did you just say to me?" she whispered. He held her eyes. The rain hammered the glass. The drawer stayed shut. The emerald sat forgotten on a tray 2 floors up, and the crushed contract cooled on his desk, and Charlotte's heels were already a memory in a car pulling into traffic, and none of it existed anymore. There was a shop with the front locked, and a navy box no one could touch, and a woman named Grace Holloway looking at him like the ground had opened, and Seo Do-jin, the koi, the man who bought signatures instead of stones, who had not let himself want anything in a decade, stood 6 feet away with his mother-of-pearl empire suddenly weightless in his hands. "Say it again," Grace said, and her voice was shaking now, all the flat gone out of it. "Say our. Say it again and look at me while you do." He opened his mouth, and the private line on the appraisal desk began to ring. Sharp, electronic, relentless. The 6 o'clock call, Charlotte's father, the machine he had just set fire to, calling to find out why it was burning. Neither of them moved to answer it. The phone kept ringing, and Grace used it. She turned on her heel and ran for the door. Her boots slapped the marble. The glass door was 6 feet, then 4. She hit the crash bar with both palms. It didn't give. Locked from a panel she couldn't see, a soft red light blinking above the frame like a slow heartbeat. She rattled it anyway. She hit it again, shoulder into the metal, the whole pane shuddering in its track. "It won't open," Do-jin said behind her. Not a threat, a fact, flat as a closed ledger. Grace spun. "Then open it." "I will." He hadn't moved from where he stood. "When you'll walk instead of run. I don't take orders from men who lock me in rooms." 6 months of it, he said. "I know. Bankers, lawyers, a landlord with a letter. Every one of them behind a desk, telling you what you'd lost while you stood on the other side of it with your hands empty." He didn't raise his voice. "I know every room you've been walked into since the funeral. I know which ones had chairs and which ones made you stand." "Then you know I'm done standing in them." "I do." That landed wrong. Her own words, from minutes ago, handed back to her like he'd been keeping them. She pressed her spine to the glass. The private line above stopped ringing. The silence after it was worse. "There's a service door," she said. "There's always a service door. 2. And a loading bay, and a stair to the roof, and a garage under the street." He said it the way a man reads a map he built. "You'd find one. You'd find it wet and cold, and standing in an alley with no phone and no ring, and a landlord's letter in your bag, and you'd be exactly where you were at 9 this morning, except tired. Better tired and mine." Something moved across his face then, not a smile. The memory of one worn down. "Yeah," he said, quiet. "You always said that." She went still. Always. There it was again, that word that had no right in a stranger's mouth. He stepped toward the wall, not toward her, and pressed his palm flat to a seam in the paneling. It sighed open. A private elevator, brushed steel, no buttons, just a single dark sensor, and a bench along the back wall upholstered in oxblood leather. He held his arm across the open door so it couldn't close. "Not the street," he said. "Upstairs. You'll be dry, you'll be fed, and you'll get every answer you came looking for. Then, if you still want the alley, I'll drive you there myself." Grace looked at the door she couldn't open, then at the box he was holding open for her. 2 cages. She hated that the warm one had chairs. "The ring," she said, "comes with me, which means it comes with you." He didn't reach for her. He waited. The waiting was its own kind of pressure. Patient, total. A man who had all night, because he'd emptied his own building to have it. She walked to the elevator. She kept 2 feet between her body and his as she passed, and she watched his hands the whole way. The onyx signet, the steel watch, hands that stayed open and low and never once closed on her arm. The doors sealed without a sound. No numbers climbed. She felt her stomach drop and knew they were going up fast, past the appraisal floor, past the office with the crumpled contract and the $2 million ring somebody had left on a velvet tray like a gum wrapper. "I go," she breathed, one hand finding the wall as the car slowed. He caught the word. His eyes came to her, sharp. "You still do that." "Do what?" "Curse in a language you don't speak." A muscle ticked at his jaw. "You picked it up off me, a long time ago." The doors opened before she could answer, and the penthouse swallowed the question whole. It was the top of the world, and it knew it. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides, the city spread out below in a wet grid of gold. Grace didn't look at the view. She looked at the doors. There were 4 she could see, and a 5th reflected in the black window, and she counted them the way her mother counted exits in every new room, a habit passed down like the ring. The floor was pale stone, warm underfoot, heated. A low fire ran blue behind glass. There was a kitchen off to the right that looked like it had never fed anybody, and a table long enough for 12 set for none. And everywhere, on the walls, in the alcoves, one thing repeated: the koi. Painted, carved, inked into a scroll, black fish climbing black water, over and over. A man surrounded by pictures of himself, and only himself. "Sit," he said. "Please." "I'll stand." Then stand. He crossed to the kitchen, and for the first time all evening, he did something ordinary. He filled a kettle. His back was to her, those shoulders that filled the doorframe, and she thought about the 4 doors, and the 5th in the glass, and how none of them would open for her either. "You're cold," he said without turning. "There's a coat over the chair. Cashmere. It's yours if you want it." "I have a coat." "You have a wet coat." "It's mine," she said, and heard how it sounded. A child guarding the one thing in the room she'd walked in with. She pulled the camel wool tighter across her chest. The cuffs were worn soft. Her mother had worn it before her. That was the point. He set 2 cups down, turned, looked at her standing in the middle of his glass palace in a dead woman's coat, with rain still in her hair, and something in him seemed to break very slowly, from the inside, where it wouldn't show if you weren't watching. Grace was watching. She'd spent 30 years learning to read men who ran out of patience. The shift in the shoulders, the change in the breathing, the moment the charm dropped and the demand showed underneath. She kept waiting for it in him. It never came. He just stood there and looked at her like she was a fire he was warming his hands at, and the not coming was its own kind of unbearable. She made herself move. If she stood still, she'd start believing the warmth. So she walked the room, slow, a hand trailing the back of a chair she'd never sit in, and she catalogued the cage, the way you learn a place you plan to leave. A wine wall behind glass, lit soft, a single painting the size of a door, a shelf of books whose spines had never cracked, and the fish, the fish, the fish. "You have all this," she said, "and you sit in it alone." "I sit in it," he agreed. He didn't say alone. The silence where the word should have gone said it for him. "There's tea," he said instead. "Barley, roasted. You never liked the green kind." "I'll pour my own." She didn't touch the cup. She let it sit and go lukewarm on the island between them, a small refusal, and she watched him watch her not drink it, and she saw the cost of it move across his face. Not anger, something worse, a man reading a language he'd taught her being used against him. He tried again, quieter. "Take the coat off. You'll catch cold. The camel one. Hang it by the fire, it'll dry. I told you, it's mine. I'm not trying to take it, Grace. I'm trying to keep you warm. Same thing, from where you're standing. She pulled it tighter, her mother's cuffs, soft as skin. You want to dry my coat. You want to feed me my own coffee. You want to give me a room with a bolt. You keep handing me things, and every single one of them is a door that only opens the way you already decided. That reached him. His jaw worked. He set both hands flat on the island, big hands, and leaned into them. And for a moment, the whole fortress of him seemed to hold his own weight up by force. Everything in this room, he said slowly, I'd set on fire tonight if you asked. The building, the wine, the paintings of the fish you keep looking at like it's an insult. His eyes came up. It is an insult. It's a tombstone with my name on it. You think I love this? I built it so I'd never have to sleep in a closet again. And every night I sleep in a bed the size of that closet's whole floor, and I feel exactly the same. Grace stopped walking. You bought a building, she said, to look at a pawn counter. I bought the building for other reasons. He came around the island, stopped a careful distance off. The counter was luck, bad luck, good luck. I've stopped being able to tell them apart. There's food, he added, nodding at the fridge. Anything you want. I don't want your food, she said it fast, before her own stomach could betray her. It had been 16 hours. The morning coffee, the rain, the bank, the pawn counter, the locked door. She'd run on fumes and fury, and both were burning low. I don't want your tea, and I don't want your coat, and I don't want your room with the special little bolt, you understand? Whatever this is, whatever you think I owe you for a night in a closet 10 years ago, you owe me nothing. His voice came down like a blade laid flat, cold side up. Get that out of your head right now. There is no debt. There is no bill. You don't pay me back by eating. Is that what the last 6 months taught you? That the men with the money always want it back with interest? She didn't answer. Her face answered for her. Yeah, he said, softer reading it. That's what they taught you. He came around the island then, slow, hands loose at his sides, and he stopped further from her than he needed to, further than any of the men in the last 6 months of rooms ever had. He gave her the space like a gift, and that was the thing that finally cracked something in her chest. Not the height, not the money, not the locked glass, the space. 10 years of men crowding her, and this one, the most dangerous of all of them, stood back. You keep looking for the trick, he said. There's no trick. There's a woman who walked into my building to sell the last thing her mother left her, and a man who has spent 10 years making sure that would never have to happen. His jaw flexed. It happened anyway. That's on me. Every dollar in this building, and I still couldn't stop you from standing at that counter in the rain. Grace's throat worked. You could have just knocked on my door. Something in him flinched at that, hard, like she'd found the exact wound under the exact scale of the exact fish. No, he said. I couldn't. That's the part you don't have yet. Then give it to me. Not standing up. Not like this. He pulled out a chair. Please. She didn't sit, but she stopped moving toward the doors, and he saw it, and he let out a breath. He looked like he'd been holding for a decade. You haven't eaten since morning. There's a receipt in your bag from a coffee cart on Ashland. Small, black, no sugar. Same as always. He said it gently, and that was the horror of it. The gentleness. You skip lunch when you're scared. You did it 10 years ago and you're doing it now. Her hand went to her bag before she could stop it. The receipt. He'd seen a receipt through a mirror 2 floors down. Or he'd seen it another way. Some way she didn't want to name. Stop, she said. Stop knowing things about me. I can't. No apology in it. Just a wall he was leaning his whole weight against. That's the whole problem, Grace. I never learned how. Her name in his mouth. He'd set it downstairs, but up here in the quiet, it had weight. She set her jaw. Rich men know things. They pay people. That's not the same as... She stopped. As what? as mattering. He took that like a slap he'd earned. Then he pulled a chair from the long empty table, turned it to face her, and sat, which put his eyes below hers, a big man making himself small on purpose. She hadn't expected that. It threw her more than the elevator had. "Ask me," he said. "Ask you what?" "The thing you've been circling since the door wouldn't open." He folded his hands between his knees. The signet caught the firelight. "You want to know how I know your mother wore the ring at the hospital, how I know the year, how I know the coffee. You've decided it's surveillance, because surveillance is a thing you can hate cleanly. Ask the real question instead." The blue fire ticked behind its glass. Somewhere below them, a whole building sat empty because this man had cleared it to be alone with her. "Who are you?" she said, for the third time that night, but softer now, and that softness scared her more than any lock. He didn't answer the way she braced for. He reached up, slow, telegraphing every inch so she could stop him, so she'd know he wasn't grabbing, and he pulled his collar down on the right side. The koi rose out of the fabric, black scales climbing his throat, the tattoo she'd already seen, and filed under stranger, under dangerous. "You saw this and called me a stranger," he said. "Downstairs. It's in your face. You looked at the ink and the suit and the height, and you built a man out of it. A monster. Somebody who buys wives and locks doors. You did lock a door." "I did." He let the collar go. "Look under it." "Under what?" "The fish. Look at what it's swimming out of." She didn't want to look. Looking meant crossing the 2 feet of floor she'd been guarding all night. But her feet moved anyway, one step, then another, until she was close enough to see past the black scales to the thing beneath them. A scar, old and puckered and badly closed, running up from under the collar into the water of the tattoo, hidden inside the design on purpose. Ink built over a wound to make the wound a decoration. Grace's breath caught. "There's more," he said, not moving, letting her look. "There's a lot more. Every one of them has a date. You'd recognize one of the dates. It's the reason you haven't seen me in 10 years. His voice stayed level, but the level was costing him now. She could hear the strain under it. A bridge holding weight it was never rated for. "But not tonight. Tonight you eat something and you sleep behind a door that locks from your side, not mine. And tomorrow, no." Grace stepped back. "No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to open me up and then say tomorrow. You ran 20 minutes ago. Because you're terrifying." "I know." And there it was, he agreed. No fight in it, and that took all the wind out of her raised hand. "I know exactly what I am. I built it. I built it on purpose, brick by brick, so that men like the one whose ring is sitting on a tray downstairs would look at me and see something they couldn't afford to cross." He stood, slow, and the smallness folded back up into all that height. And it worked. It worked so well that the one person I built it to protect walked into my building tonight and looked at me and saw a monster too. The word protect hung there. Grace grabbed it. "Protect," she said. "You said protect." He'd heard himself. She watched him hear it, watched the door he hadn't meant to open swing on its hinge. For 1 second, the whole fortress showed a crack. The man inside the koi, the boy inside the man, 10 years of something pressed flat behind his teeth. Then he closed it. He turned to the glass and the gold city and put his hands in his pockets and became the koi again, seamless, cold. "Eat," he said to the window. "There's a room down the hall. Yours. The door has a bolt. I had it put in an hour ago." An hour ago, before she'd run, before the elevator, he'd built her a room with a lock she controlled, before she'd even refused to come. Grace stood in the middle of all that glass and felt the floor tilt under a truth she couldn't hold yet, that everything in this night, the emptied store, the untouched ring, the bolt on her side of the door, had been pointed at keeping her, and none of it, not one piece, had been pointed at hurting her. She hated that it made her want to sit down. You left me, she said. It came out of her before she chose it. Not a question. The whole 10 years in 3 words. His shoulders went rigid against the light. You left me in a room the size of a closet, Grace went on, and her voice was shaking now, not with fear, with something older. And you didn't say goodbye, you didn't leave a note, you were just gone. And I read those 2 names off that ring to you the night before, like a promise. And then you were smoke. And now you own the city, and you locked me in it, and you say protect like it's supposed to mean something. He turned around. Whatever was on his face, she'd never see the front of it directly, because he crossed to the long table instead, opened a drawer she hadn't noticed, and took out a small navy box of woven cloth, worn soft at the corners. Her mother's box, the rings box. I told them, nobody touches it but me, he said, and set it on the table between them, exactly halfway, in the no man's land she'd been defending all night. So I'm the one giving it back to you, not the pawn floor, not a ledger. Me. Grace looked at the box, 12 inches away. Everything in her leaned toward it. Open it, she said. Prove it's in there. It's in there. Open it. He put one finger on the lid. Stopped. If I open it, he said, low, you'll take it, and you'll go to the door and you'll spend the night testing every lock in this building, instead of hearing the one thing I have left to say. I know you, so I'm asking you to hear it first. Then the box is yours, and the door is yours, and if you want the alley, I'll carry you down myself. The blue fire ticked. The city burned gold under the rain. 12 inches of black walnut lay between a woman in her dead mother's coat and the only thing she'd walked in to save. Grace reached across the table and put her hand flat on the box, over his finger, the first time she'd touched him in 10 years. Then say it, she said, and look at me while you do. His finger stayed under her palm. He didn't pull it back, and he didn't turn the box, and for a breath, the only thing moving in the whole glass room was the rain running sideways across the far wall of windows. Then he looked up. He gave her the eyes, full, no angle, no glass between them anymore, no floor of appraisal counters, just the black of them fixed on her face like she was the last lit thing in the city. And that look broke her worse than any word could have, because she knew that look. She'd known it in a room the size of a closet 10 years ago, on a boy who owned 2 shirts and a mattress on the floor. She'd know it in the dark, deaf, from across a stadium. It was the same look, not 1 degree cooler, 10 years, an empire, a tattoo up his neck, a building he bought to watch a pawn counter, and the look had not changed. Her hand started to shake on top of his. No, she said it soft, then louder. No, you don't get to look at me like that. He held still. Say something else. Say anything else. Her voice climbed. But not that. Not that face. Grace. You looked at me like that the whole time? The word cracked in the middle. 10 years? You had this face the whole time and you... She pulled her hand off his like the box had turned to a stove. She stepped back from the table. 1 step, 2, until the long edge of it was between them again. 12 place settings for nobody laid out down the middle. You just left. Something crossed his jaw. He kept his hands where she could see them, flat on the black wood, on either side of the little navy box. Yes. The Korean came out of him low. He said it again in English, because she'd earned English. Yes, I did. Why? Not a question now. A demand. The kind you make with your whole body. Look at me and say why. His mouth opened, closed. His thumb moved a 1/4 inch toward the box and stopped, like even that was too much to spend. Not yet, he said. The 2 words landed in her chest like a fist. She laughed. It came out wrong, wet and jagged. Nothing funny anywhere near it. Not yet. She dragged the back of her wrist under her nose. Not yet. You've had 10 years of not yet, You had 11 minutes behind a mirror of not yet. Her breath was going ragged. I have been in rooms all day, all 6 months, full of men saying not yet to me. The bank said not yet. The lawyer said not yet. The city said not yet. And now you, Grace, don't. She held up a hand, palm out, and the hand was trembling so hard, she watched it like it belonged to somebody else. Don't say my name like it's yours. The first tears went before she could stop them. Not the quiet kind. Not the one clean tear she'd let fall on the pawn counter this afternoon and wiped away with her thumb. These came up out of somewhere she'd been sitting on for half a year, and they came with sound, and she hated the sound, and it kept coming anyway. She pressed both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders went. The camel coat, her mother's coat, worn soft at the cuffs, shook on her frame. Dojin came off the table. No. She got one word through her fingers. Stay. He stopped. A grown man, 6'4", shoulders that filled a doorway, and he stopped like she'd put a hand on his chest. He lowered back down, not into the chair, to the floor. He went to one knee beside the long table, so his eyes came up under hers again, so she was looking down at him now, and it wrecked her more, because a man like this didn't kneel, and they both knew it. She didn't stay to watch it. She pushed off nothing and went for the nearest door on legs that barely held her. The second one, the one over by the cold kitchen that had never fed a soul. Her palm hit the handle. It didn't give. She tried it the other way. Nothing. No seam of light under it, no keyhole, just brushed steel warm from the room, and dead as the wall. She went to the next one. Same. Her breath came fast and shallow now, and some old animal part of her had taken the wheel, the part that counted exits in every room because her mother taught her to. 4 doors visible, one doubled in the black window. She'd try all 5. She crossed to the third with the camel coat flaring behind her, and shoved the handle down hard enough to hurt her wrist. Locked. Grace, behind her, still on his knee, not chasing. They open for you. She hit the third door with the flat of her hand, once. You said it yourself. Everything answers to you. She spun on him. So make them answer. Watch. She pointed at the door like she could command it out of spite. Open. It stayed shut. Her arm dropped. Her chest heaved. 40 floors. Warm stone. A table set for 12 ghosts. And not one door in the whole gold box would move for her. She pressed her spine to the dead steel and slid until she was crouched against it. And from there she looked at him across the long room, still kneeling, still 6 careful feet away, hands open. Get up, she said. No. Get up, Dojin. I can't. His name came out of her by accident. She heard it leave her mouth. She hadn't said it in 10 years. It tasted like the closet room, like winter, like being 20 and stupid and sure. He heard it too. His whole face moved. Say it again, he said. Quiet. Wrecked. No. She backed into the cold glass. The city glittered gold and wet at her back. 40 floors down and useless. No. I'm done saying things for you. I said the names for you. That night. I read you the 2 names off the inside of that ring like it was, her voice split clean in half, like it was a promise. I held it up to the one bulb we had, and I read you my grandmother and my grandfather and the year, and you looked at me with that face, exactly that face, and the next morning you were gone. No note. No. She hit the glass behind her with the flat of her hand. Once. Nothing. 10 years of nothing. And now I put that same ring on a pawn counter to save my dead mother's shop, and you come down the back stairs like the sky fell. It did, he said. Don't. It did fall. His voice stayed low, but it had gravel in it now. The first crack she'd heard all night going wider. The second I saw your hand on that counter. Everything I built to keep you out of this. He stopped himself. Physically. She watched him bite it back. Watched the muscle in his jaw lock down over whatever came next. Not yet. he said again, softer, almost to himself, like a man holding a door shut against a flood. Her hand was still on the glass where she'd hit it. She left it there. The cold came up through her palm and she let it, because the cold was the only thing in the room that wasn't him. You know what I did today? Her voice dropped, went flat and terrible, the calm on the far side of screaming. Before all this, before your mirror and your money and your back stairs. She turned her head to look at him. I stood in the rain outside a pawn shop for 11 minutes because I couldn't make my hand open the door. 11. My mother's ring in my fist so tight, it left a line across my palm. And I told myself the thing she used to say. A thing's not gone, as long as somebody's still trying to save it. And then I walked in and I put the last piece of her on a man's velvet, and I asked what he'd give me for it. Her breath hitched. That's what today cost me. That's the floor, Dojin. That's the actual bottom. And you were up here the whole time, watching me hit it through a piece of one-way glass, deciding when to come down. He flinched. Both hands came off the table an inch, like the words had shoved him. I didn't decide, he said. The pen fell out of my hand. The pen? She laughed, the wet, broken laugh again. You were signing something, when you saw me, weren't you? Something with a lot of zeros, and the pen fell. She read his face and got it right, and watched him not deny it. So I interrupted your good day. A woman you left in a closet 10 years ago walked into the bottom of your building and ruined your paperwork. You didn't ruin it. His voice went rough. You ended it. There's a difference. And it needed ending. It should have ended years ago. It ended the second. Stop. She pressed her fingers to her eyes. Stop telling me things sideways. Every answer you give me is a door with another lock behind it. She slid down the glass. She didn't decide to. Her knees just went, and the terracotta dress rode against the cold pane, and she sat on the heated stone floor with her mother's coat pooling around her, and cried the way you cry when you've run all the way out of pride. He stayed on his knee across the room, 6 feet of empty warm floor between them, hands open on his thighs, and he didn't close it. She noticed even through the storm of it that he didn't close it, that he sat in the distance she'd drawn like it was a wall he'd promised not to climb. That was the part that undid the last of her. Why won't you just come over here? She said, and hated it, and said it anyway. Because you told me to stay, he said, so I'll stay till you don't. She wiped her face with both hands, and it did nothing. You don't get to be that. She gestured at him, at all of it, the kneeling, the open hands, the patience. You don't get to leave me in a closet with the winter coming, and then be careful with me 10 years later. Pick one. I never got to be careful with you. The gravel again. That's the hole. Then why? Full voice. The word tore out of her and bounced off 3 walls of glass. Why would you throw me away if you look at me like I'm... If you... She couldn't finish it. She pressed the heel of her hand into her sternum, like she could push the ache back down. You don't throw away something you look at like that. So either you're lying with your face right now, tonight, or you lied to me every day for 10 years by not being there. Which one? Tell me which one, so I can breathe. He was quiet a long moment. The rain drew lines down the glass beside her head. Neither, he said. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. Neither, she repeated. The word tasted like ash. She let her head fall forward until her forehead rested on her own knees, the terracotta of the dress soaking up the wet from her face. For a while she just breathed, ragged, then slower. The heated stone warmed the backs of her thighs, and she resented every degree of it, resented the comfort of a floor that cost more than her mother's whole shop. When she lifted her head, her eyes had changed. The crying hadn't stopped, but something behind it had gone hard and clear. You want to know what's worse than being left? She said. He waited. Being right about it. She wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand. For 10 years I told myself I made it up. That the boy in the closet didn't look at me the way I remembered. That I was young and I wanted it so bad I painted it on his face after the fact. I built a whole piece out of deciding I imagined you. Her voice thinned. And then you come down the stairs tonight with that exact face, and you take my piece too. You take the one thing I built to live without you. Now I can't even have that. Now I know I was right, and it's worse, because right doesn't put anybody in the closet. Right just means you looked at me like this and left me anyway. Something moved across his throat. He knelt in the warm distance she'd drawn and took it, all of it, without a shield. Yes, he said, just that. That's it? Yes? You're right about all of it, he said. Every word. I looked at you like this. I left you anyway. There's a reason that turns it inside out. And it's mine to give you tonight. And it's the last thing I own that I haven't handed over. But I'm not going to argue you out of a single thing you just said, because you earned every one of them in the rain today, on your knees over a velvet counter, while I stood behind glass like a coward and let you. The word again, coward. He kept using it on himself like a blade he'd finally decided to hold by the edge. She dropped her head back against the window, closed her eyes, let the tears run sideways into her hair the way they wanted to. Then I want to go, she said. You said if I still wanted the alley after, you'd take me yourself. I want the alley. I want the rain. I want to be wet and cold and gone. He didn't move. You said that. She pushed. Downstairs. You promised. Walk instead of run. And the door opens. So open it. I will, he said. When? When you've heard the last thing. His hand came up, slow, telegraphed, and settled on the top of the navy box on the table above him without lifting it. It's right here, the ring and the reason. Both in this room. You get both, or neither, and I'm not going to hand you the ring and let you run before you have the reason, because then you'd spend another 10 years thinking the boy who left didn't want you. His voice dropped so low she felt it more than heard it. I can survive most things, Grace. I found that out the hard way. I can't survive you believing that. She opened her eyes. He was looking at her over the edge of the table, on one knee, one big scarred hand flat on a $5 cloth box, like it held the last of his blood in it. That's not fair, she whispered. No, you keep saying that. No, not yet. You keep locking doors. She sat up off the glass. Something in her hardened even as the tears kept coming, the same thing that had made her walk into a pawn shop in the rain, when everyone told her the shop was already gone. You locked the front door downstairs. You locked the drawer. You locked me out of a whole life 10 years ago, and locked it so quiet I didn't even hear the key turn. And now you want to sit there and decide the order I get to find things out. She got a knee under herself. Pushed up off the cold glass, one hand braced, until she was standing again, unsteady, streaked, furious, 40 floors up in a fortress, with no ring on her finger, and no money in her bag, and no phone, and no coat but the dead woman's coat on her back. You built the whole building so I couldn't leave the room before you were ready, didn't you? He rose too, slow, kept the table between them because she needed it there. I built the building for other reasons, he said. But tonight? Yes. Tonight the doors are mine. He said it without apology and without pride, just fact. And somehow that was worse than a threat. Every one of them, the elevator, the stairs, the dock, the roof, all of it answers to me and nobody else, and there is one reason for that, and you're going to hate it, and then you're going to understand it, but not while you're looking for a way past me. So, he turned one hand over, open, on the black wood. Stop looking for the door, Grace. There isn't one until I've said the thing. There's just me, and this box, and 40 floors of me, making sure the only way out of this room goes through the truth first. She stood there shaking in the middle of the glass, the gold city drowned below, 12 empty chairs down a table set for no one, a peacoat black koi swimming up every wall around her, and she understood, all at once, exactly how trapped she was. Not by walls, by him, by the one thing she'd never learned to walk out of. She'd walked out of everything else. That was the whole shape of the last 6 months. Walking out of the bank with the letter in her fist, walking out of the lawyer's office, walking out of the landlord's back room where 3 men in good suits explained her mother's shop to her like she was slow. She'd learned to keep her chin level and turn on her heel and leave rooms full of no. She was good at it now. It was the only thing she'd gotten good at. And here was the one room she couldn't leave. Not because the doors were steel, because the man kneeling in the middle of it was still, 10 years later, the only exit she'd never once wanted to use. Her eyes went to the box, to his hand on it, to the door past his shoulder, the 4th door, the one reflected doubled in the black window, the one she'd counted on the way in and told herself she'd use. He watched her count it. He always watched her count. "It's locked," he said gently. "They're all locked. I'm sorry, not to keep you, to keep everyone else out for the 10 minutes it takes me to stop being a coward." The word landed strange in the huge room. Coward. From him. From the koi. She wiped her face one more time. Useless. And when her hand came down, her jaw had set, and her spine had come back under her the way it always did, right at the bottom, right when there was nothing left to lose, and so nothing left to be afraid of. "Fine," she said. Her voice was ruined and steady both. "Fine. You want to trap me in a glass box until I hear it. Then I'll hear it standing up." She squared to him across the table, tears still bright on her face, chin level, not sitting on your warm floor crying, not sinking down the window, standing. "Look at me and say the reason. Right now. No more not yet. You said the truth's in this room. Then the truth is what opens the door. So say it, and let's see if either of us survives it." For the first time all night, Seo Dojin looked afraid. His hand tightened on the box. His throat moved. Somewhere far below them, a service line began to ring. Thin, insistent, the sound of a man's father waiting on a call that would never come. And he didn't so much as glance at it. The city glittered. The rain wrote its lines. 12 empty chairs, 1 navy box, 10 years standing up between them on their feet at last. He opened his mouth to say the reason. "There was a man named Kang," he said. The name landed flat on the long table, and Grace held still, both hands at her sides. "He owned the docks before I did. He owned the men on the docks. He owned the boy I was, right up until the boy stopped being useful." Grace stayed where she was, chin level, the tears drying tight on her face. She wanted the rest before she moved. 10 years ago, I had one thing that wasn't his," Dojin said. "One room the size of a closet, and a woman in it who read me 2 names off a ring like they were a map, out." His hand pressed flat on the navy box, still not lifting it. Kang found the woman before he found the room. Grace felt the floor tilt. She didn't let it show past a small step, one boot sliding, catching. "He didn't touch you," Dojin said fast, reading the step. "He sent me a photograph, you, at the bench in your mother's shop, sanding a table leg. A red circle drawn around your head in grease pencil." His jaw worked once. The message on the back was one word: choose. The word sat there between them, ugly, and Grace understood the shape of it before he finished the sentence. "So I chose," Dojin said. "I let him think I chose him. I walked out of that room while you slept, and I never wrote the note, because a note is a thread, and a thread is a way back, and a way back is a red circle drawn around your head." His voice cracked clean down the middle, and he let it. "The colder I got, the safer you got. That was the whole math. That was the only math I had." Grace's mouth opened. Nothing came. 10 years of a story she'd told herself, sanded off in one breath, and underneath it a different story. worse and better at once. She thought of the morning she'd woken in that room and found the other side of the bed cold. She'd built a whole decade on that cold sheet. She'd decided he was a boy who took what he wanted and left when it stopped being fun. She'd told her mother that. Her mother had listened and said nothing and kept sanding a table leg, and now Grace understood the silence had been her mother's, not agreement. "You could have told me," she said finally, small. "I would have run with you." "You'd have run toward me," Dojin said. "That's exactly what he was waiting for you to do." He lifted his eyes. "The only way to keep him off you was to make him believe I'd thrown you away, and the only way to make him believe it was to make you believe it too. You had to sell it, Grace. You had to hate me for real. A performance leaks, and your grief didn't." She pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth. The camel coat shook at the cuffs, her mother's cuffs, worn soft. 10 years, she said into her wrist. 10 years I spent buying him out piece by piece, Dojin said. The docks, the men, the room he ran it from. I took the last of it, 18 months ago. Kang doesn't own a shoelace now. He turned his right hand over on the box, the onyx signet catching the low light. The wedding you watched me almost sign today, that was the last brick. Whitmore's father had the last shipping route Kang used to hold. Marry the daughter, close the route, salt the ground so no one could ever rebuild what Kang built, and point it at you again. Grace lowered her wrist. You were going to marry a stranger to protect a woman you left. Yes. That's insane. Yes, he said again. No shield on it. Charlotte knew? Grace asked. The name felt strange in her mouth. A woman she'd seen for 4 seconds through a window she hadn't known was a window. Charlotte knew she was a route on a map, Dojin said. She's smarter than her father. She left the emerald on the tray on her way out. Told me, God help whoever you are. His mouth flattened. Her father made a call at 6. I let it ring. Tomorrow he'll understand the marriage is dead and the route is already closed anyway, and there's nothing to buy and nobody to threaten, because Kang is a shoelace and I don't need the Whitmores to bury a man who's already buried. He shook his head once. There's no danger in that phone. I checked it against your name before I let it ring. That's the only test a phone gets from me now. And your books, Grace said. The ring never went in a ledger. A man downstairs almost logged it. Arthur wanted to log it, Dojin said. He's kept my books 11 years, and tonight I told him the one thing that would never touch them. He warned me about an audit. I told him I'd be the audit. He almost smiled. Ruth Holloway's wedding band is not an asset. It was never collateral. It doesn't exist on any page I own. It exists on your hand. That's the only ledger it goes in. I had 11 minutes today to find out it was also unnecessary. His hand slid off the box. He stood, and for the first time all night he came around the end of the long table, slow, telegraphing every foot, until only the corner of it stood between them. You were downstairs pawning her ring to save her shop. Alone, broke, 16 hours without eating. And I understood, standing at that glass, that I'd spent a decade keeping the wolf off your door while the bank walked straight up the path and knocked. Grace's breath hitched. The shop. Handled, Dojin said. Not a promise this time. He reached into the breast of his jacket and set a folded page on the table between them, creased in thirds. The lien on Holloway Restoration was bought and cleared at 4 o'clock. The auction is cancelled. The building is in your name, free, and there's no note against it. No interest. No 90 days. It's done. Grace didn't pick it up. She stared at it like it might move. 6 months of letters from a bank. A lien she'd found in a shoebox after the funeral. A landlord's face. A lawyer's. A loan officer who'd said the process doesn't bend for daughters. 21 days to an auction. All of it, gone in a folded page she hadn't touched yet. Why would you? Because it's the second thing you've been fighting for tonight, he said. The first is in the box. I fought 6 months for that shop, Grace said. Her voice thinned. By myself. In rooms full of men who'd already decided. And you cleared it at 4 o'clock with a phone call. I cleared the paper, Dojin said. You did the fighting. The paper was never the hard part, Grace. Refusing to put the ring down when the paper said you had to. That was the hard part. You didn't refuse. You put it down. And that's the thing that broke me at the glass. You'd run out of everything, except the one thing you swore you'd never sell, and you were selling it anyway, because your mother taught you a thing's not gone, as long as somebody's still trying. His hand flattened on the deed. I've been the somebody in the dark for 10 years. Let me be it in the light for 1 page. That put the tears back, hot and fast, but she squared her shoulders against them. She'd learned to do that in 6 months of rooms. You keep handing me things. I'm not handing you anything, Dojin said. I'm giving back what was already yours. There's a difference. You'll feel it in a second. He reached for the navy box. His hand wasn't steady. She watched it not be steady. This enormous man, and something in her chest that had been locked since a funeral 6 months ago, turned over once. There's more, he said. You should see the rest before I open it, so you never wonder again what a night with Kang bought. He pulled the steel gray collar down at the right side of his neck, the same slow pull as before, and this time, he kept going, working 2 shirt buttons free. The koi rose out of the fabric. Under it, along the edge of the old scar she'd already seen, a second line ran down toward his collarbone, thin and pale, and below that a third, puckered, older. Every one of these has a date, he said. I told you that. He touched the topmost, near the jaw. This one is the night he sent the photograph. This one, the collarbone, is the night I bought the docks. This one, lower, where she couldn't see, and he didn't pull further, is the night I found out he'd gone soft and stupid, and there was nobody left to point at your head. That was the night I let myself believe it might be over. 18 months ago, he let the collar go. I sat in that closet-sized room I sleep in, and I told myself I'd earned the right to walk up to your door, and then I didn't. Because I was a coward, exactly like I said. Grace wiped her face with the heel of her hand, rough. Why didn't you? Because a man doesn't get to disappear for 10 years and knock like nothing happened, Dojin said. I thought I needed a reason good enough, a gift big enough. I thought I'd build it until it outweighed what I'd done. His mouth twisted. I was still building it this afternoon. $2 million of it, sitting on a velvet tray, and then you set a 14-karat band on a counter, and it outweighed everything I'd ever owned in 1 second. The room went very quiet. The rain wrote its lines down the 3 walls of glass, and the gold city smeared underneath. Open it, Grace said. He opened it. The band lay in the worn navy slot, the way it had lain there for 31 years on her mother's hand, and 6 months in a drawer since. Thin, flat, scratched to a soft shine at the wear points. Dojin lifted it out with 2 fingers, careful, the way Daniel had lifted it, the way you lift a thing that outlasts people. Read it to me, he said. Grace's throat closed. You know what it says. I know what it says, he agreed. I want to hear you say it, the way you said it to me once, in the dark, when I had nothing, and you gave me the only inheritance you had. He held the ring so the light caught the inside curve. Say the names, Grace. Her hands were shaking now, and she let them. She leaned in over the box, over his fingers, and read the 2 names engraved along the inside of the band, worn but there. Cut in 1978 by a jeweler both of them had outlived, Ruth and Samuel. Her voice broke on her father's name. Always trying, she pressed her lips together. And the date, 1978. Always trying, Dojin repeated, softer than she'd ever heard him. Your mother's whole gospel, cut into gold before you were born. He looked up at her. A thing's not gone as long as somebody's still trying to save it. Grace made a sound, half laugh, half sob. She said that to me the day I decided to pawn it. She said it right, Dojin said. You were still trying. So it wasn't gone. His thumb moved over the two names. Neither were you. I just kept trying from the one place you couldn't see. And then Co. Dojin, who owned the docks and the men and the building and the private elevator and every locked door in it, went down. Not to one knee this time, both. On the heated stone floor of his fortress, below her eyes, below everything, the koi dark on his neck and the ring bright in his hand, he knelt all the way down in front of Grace Holloway and looked up. The empire can burn, he said. The docks, the routes, the building, the piece of paper that says the shop is yours. I'll sign it all away tonight if you tell me it's the price. I don't need any of it. I built every brick of it aimed at one door, and I've been standing on the wrong side of that door for 18 months, telling myself I wasn't ready. He held the band up between them. I'm ready. I'm 10 years late, and I'm ready. Give me your hand. Grace looked at him kneeling there. At the scars he'd turned into a fish, so a wound could look like a decision. At the folded page on the table that meant her mother's shop would open its doors in the morning. At the man who had loved her so badly and so completely that he'd learned to look like he didn't. She lifted her left hand. It didn't shake anymore. Don't drop it, she said, wet and fierce and almost laughing. It's the only one that ever mattered. I know, he said. It never left your hand. I just took 10 years to put it back. He slid the thin, scratched band of yellow gold down her finger, and it sat where it had always been meant to sit, warm from his grip, worn from her mother's decades, catching the smeared gold of the city through the glass. His hands closed around hers over the ring. He bowed his head to it. His shoulders shook, this once, and she let them, her free hand coming up to the back of his neck, over the fish, over the scars, holding him down there on the floor of the room he'd built. Say it again, he said into her hand, the same 3 words he'd asked for downstairs and on his knee an hour ago, the ones she'd refused twice. This time, she didn't refuse. Dojin, she said. Then, softer, the second name of the night, the one that undid the last lock in her chest. Get up, Dojin. This time he got up. He rose slow, still holding her hand, until he was standing over her the way he was built to stand, and she tipped her chin up the way she was built to tip it, and neither of them said the thing anymore, because there was nothing left to keep from each other. 10 years of glass and locked doors and a red circle in grease pencil, and a $2 million ring left on a velvet tray 2 floors down, and a stub lying on the marble by the counter, and a wolf named Kang who didn't own a shoelace. All of it collapsed to the space between 2 faces. He kissed her. First time in 10 years. Her hands full of his collar, his hands full of her. The band cool then warm between them where their fingers laced. Outside, the rain kept writing. The 12 empty chairs stayed empty. The kitchen that had never fed anyone waited. And on the long table, in a worn navy box open to the ceiling, the velvet slot sat empty for the first time since a funeral, because the ring was where it belonged. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his sternum and breathed. He put his chin on her hair. Below them, somewhere in the locked and darkened building, a phone that had been ringing for the father of a woman named Charlotte finally stopped. The doors, Grace said into his shirt. Open, he said. All of them. They were only ever locked for 10 minutes. I told you. He pulled back enough to look at her. You can have the alley if you still want it. I'll walk you down myself. That was the deal. Grace looked at the ring on her hand, then at the window, the wet gold city, the shop somewhere out there on Ashland with the peeling second L, hers now, open in the morning. I don't want the alley, she said. I want to see the shop tonight. I want to stand in it knowing nobody's taking it. Then we'll go stand in it, Dojin said, and for the first time all night, the koi smiled, and it was the boy's smile. The one from the closet-sized room, the one 10 years and an empire hadn't managed to kill. There's a receipt in your coat pocket, by the way, from a coffee cart on Ashland. You should eat something first. You've gone 16 hours. 17, Grace said. And stop knowing things about me. I can't, he said. I told you, I never learned how. She looked past him, at the 4 doors and the 5th one folded in the black glass, the doors she'd tested with her own hands an hour ago. All steel, all dead. There's a room back there, she said. You said you put a bolt on it, my side. An hour before you ran, Dojin said. So you'd have one door in this building that answered to you and not to me. It's still there. You never needed it, but it's yours if you ever do. He watched her. Nothing in this room was ever pointed at you except me, and I was pointed wrong for 10 years. You're pointed right now, Grace said. I'm pointed at a shop on Ashland with the lights off, he said. Same as you. He picked up the folded page off the table and set it in her hand, next to the ring, and closed the empty navy box and set it in her other hand, so she left the room, holding all of it, the deed, the box, and the band already on her finger, where it had always been. The private elevator opened without a button. They stepped in together. It fell fast and quiet, down past the office, where a $2 million emerald still sat forgotten on a velvet tray beside a contract creased and never signed, its last page marked by a single dropped comma of ink. Past the appraisal floor, where a 90-day pawn stub lay face up on the marble, its stamped deadline already meaningless, a clock that had stopped mattering the second the ring came off the ledger. Grace looked at the stub through the glass as they dropped past and felt nothing owed on it anymore. The elevator carried them all the way to the dark locked store, where Dojin touched a panel and the red light on the front door went green. He held the door. The rain came in cool off the street. Grace stepped out first, her mother's coat around her, her mother's ring on her hand, her mother's shop waiting 3 miles east with its lights off and its lien gone. She stopped on the wet sidewalk and turned back. He was standing in the doorway of his own building, letting her have the first step, hands open, the way he'd kept them open all night. Come on, she said. It's cold. The koi walked out into the rain after her and let the door lock itself behind him. He'd stopped counting doors a long time ago. There was only one he'd ever wanted open, and she was already 3 steps ahead of him, holding it for him now, the way he'd held every one for her without her ever knowing. The only ring that ever mattered never left her hand. He just took 10 years to put it back. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Tell me, K-Fam, have you ever almost sold the one thing that carried your whole heart just to survive one more month? Have you ever loved someone who pushed you away and only years later understood the coldness was a shield built to protect you? Mark my words, K-Fam. Sometimes the ring that matters never really leaves your hand. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about love, sacrifice, and redemption, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.